जैसे यहाँ आया बोलने के लिए चीन के बारे में, सुना पाकिस्तान के बारे में किससे. Let me just say that as India's envoy in Pakistan at that point in time, I found there are natural differences everywhere. But I must compliment both the service chiefs here for the way they did a splendid job for the country. And above all, I must compliment the political leadership for some of the decisions they took. I must compliment the political leadership, Mr. Vajpayee particularly, for the decisions they took. One important one which I was present when it was taken was when I was told to head back to Islamabad when in Delhi, because the airstrikes were about to commence, was Mr. Vajpayee's strict instructions: support though, don't cross the line of control. Wars are fought for political reasons. Victory in Kargil certainly involved a dimension of military strength to prove to Pakistan that force won't work. More importantly, it was the first time in history that it forced the Americans to force Pakistan to not to violate the line of control, the sanctity of the line of control. So I think, apart from the service chiefs, it would be sad if there was controversy about Kargil, because I think all said and done, we did a great job, myself excluded. Talking today about India-China, let me just start off by saying a very interesting thing. I was once going about how we don't understand what others mean. You know, Dr. Radhakrishnan was our ambassador, and this is a conversation not made public, but I've seen the record and I don't mind since it is so old. Dr. Radhakrishnan was our ambassador in Moscow. He suddenly received a call to meet Stalin, who never met any ambassador. Now, it was a very interesting conversation. What Dr. Radhakrishnan did not realize, that for 3 weeks, Mao Zedong had been waiting in Leningrad to get a meeting with Stalin. Stalin kept asking Radhakrishnan, how do you intend to build up your army? How do you intend to become a forceful power? Is your army independent? It is under a British commander-in-chief. And Dr. Radhakrishnan, in reply, spoke of a new era of peace and solidarity and independence, and of how, there is a new emerging power whose leader is in Soviet Union, Mao, and that this will bring a new awakening in Asia. Stalin's reply: Mao is here. He speaks a language I do not understand. This is a fact, and I'm bringing this out as a fact. It is interesting that one does not, when dealing with an adversary, succeed if you don't understand his mind. And in the case of the Pakistanis, it's a ghar ki baat hai, you know what's going to come next from this guy across the border. But with the case of the Chinese, the problem has been the Chinese mind, the Chinese language, and the Chinese history, as Bharat had alluded to. The Chinese think millennia ahead. They have certain illusions about their history, which in their mind is reality, including of areas like Tibet, which were largely ruled by the Manchus and the Mongols, but not by the Han Chinese. Now, coming to more contemporary times, and I don't want to go into the ancient history of it, China, India, British India and Tibet met in 1914 in Simla to determine the respective boundaries. Now, the Chinese signed the documents but did not agree with the maps. But the maps they did not agree to were the boundaries between inner Tibet and outer Tibet. They never disapproved in 1914 of the McMahon line. This is a fact we seem to forget historically, but they never accepted the McMahon line. It is also true in the western sector, the boundary was undemarcated. It went up to as much power as much as Chinese imperial power could extend, or the Tibetans could extend, or Mr. Zorawar Singh could extend. Now, there are two distinct lines which were drawn at different points in history. One was the Johnson line and the other was the MacDonald line. I think I won't go into the details, but broadly, the Chinese in 62 indicated that they would settle for somewhere near MacDonald line. But where we go wrong with the Chinese is the belief that they were willing to accept the MacDonald line and also the McMahon line. That if we would the truth is totally different. If you go through Chinese documents, they merely said, you recognize our line and we will not transgress your line. This is why it is extremely important to understand the Chinese mind, the language and the way they function. And also another principle in diplomacy, we tend to view the world as we would wish it to be and not the way it is. As I was recalling this conversation with Stalin. Stalin hated Mao. The differences had started then. But yet, we were too shy to raise China's aggressive behavior with the Soviet Union when it started. We were too shy to raise Tibet when it started. And on Tibet itself, in March 1947, Pandit Nehru's interim government held a major Asian relations conference, wherein they invited the then Chinese regime headed by Chiang Kai-shek and Tibet. And the Chinese did not protest. It was only under Mao, when Chinese extended their influence into Tibet, that India started talking of a one China policy. Important point is, but when you agree to a one China policy, why are you giving up a card without first determining the border? Tash khelte samay you never show your aces. And I'm afraid, I think in fairness, we are in a process of learning. In the 50s and 40s, nobody had serious knowledge of foreign policy in the Foreign Office except Sir Girija Shankar Bajpayee. And Sardar Patel's letter to Panditji was discussed and drafted by Sir Girija Shankar Bajpayee. There was nobody else in the Indian Foreign Office who had that experience. So I think we should be charitable to the times. And sometimes we are over uncharitable to ourselves. By 1951, China signed a 17-point agreement with Tibet, granting Tibet very extensive autonomy, in which the Dalai Lama's temporal and spiritual authority was recognized. At least we should have, or at the very least, insisted on the status quo of our presence in Tibet being maintained in terms of that 17-point agreement. We did not. In 1954, we made our first blunder when we signed the India-China Treaty on relation between the Tibet region of China. We did this without even seeking to know where China recognizes Tibet's borders with India to be. And we virtually gave away all our rights on Tibet. So again, I am going through a process. I am trying to be charitable. I don't want to be critical of a period when we were new to the world. The only thing we were talking was World War. I will bring you peace in Indochina. I will decolonize Africa. We want Afro-Asian solidarity. Nobody was bothering to look at our doorstep. That was the reality of the world as we saw it. I read it as a part of Nehruvian idealism. But that is the reality of the time. In 1956, the young Dalai Lama came to India, fleeing for the 2500th anniversary of Lord Buddha, Lord Buddha's enlightenment, and he was reluctant to return. Yet Chu Enlai comes and tells Nehru, please get him to return. We are very nice people, and we will agree to the 17-point agreement with him, and they locked him up when he went back. Now, I think one must understand I come back to this basic point of one having to understand the Chinese mind. And my colleague Shyam Saran recently spoke in Delhi, and Bharat was there and I was there, and a few points, because he has negotiated with the Chinese and he went through this horrible experience in 1986 during the Sundarangchu incident, or the Wangdong incident as we call it, when the Chinese really spoke in very rude terms. And his thesis is as follows. In Chinese diplomatic behavior, they will insistently demand, sometimes obtain, explicit formulations from friend and adversary alike on issues of importance to their interests, but will rarely concede clarity and finality in any of their formulations, reflecting the other side's interests. That is Chinese negotiating behavior. And I am afraid we have too many people here, and I'll come to that at the end of it, on Chinese diplomacy within India, within our political parties, within our corporate sector, which are undermining our longer-term interests and relations with them. But in any case, he says, in 2003, during Prime Minister Vajpayee's visit, China conceded Sikkim as a part of India, but this was not explicitly recorded in written formulation. In 2005, during Wen Jiabao's visit to India, China went a step further and handed over maps of China showing Sikkim as a part of India. Recently, some Chinese scholars have pointed out that the absence of an official statement recognizing Indian sovereignty over Sikkim leaves the door open to subsequent shifts if necessary. Now, in China behavior, and this is a finding of long research by my colleague Shyam, he says there is no moral or ethical dimension. No, he says, deception, let me add. It is easy to accuse the Chinese of betrayal as Nehru did after the 1962 war. But a clear awareness that deception is after all an integral element of Chinese strategic culture may have spared us the angst in the past. Such awareness should certainly be a part of our posture in confronting challenges from China in the future. And he says another point that he makes is there is no moral or ethical dimension in Chinese minds attached to deception, and the Chinese would find it odd to be accused of betrayal, in particular by a foreign country. Betrayal is very natural. Now, I think this is the mindset we have to understand of adversaries. Bharat spoke of, the Pakistan not warranting attention that it receives. It would not. But we must realize that Pakistan is the primary instrument of a Chinese policy of containment of India. China is not supplying nuclear missiles. The latest now they are supplying plutonium warheads so that they can produce tactical nuclear missiles. You would have read what I have written in the Tribune. Because for China, morality does not matter. They will strike deals with anyone. Believe me, in Afghanistan they are dealing with Karzai and striking deals with the Taliban. This is the sort of person you are. And Pakistan becomes the danger it is because of the Chinese power upsetting a natural equilibrium. And therefore I entirely agree with what Bharat says. While disagreeing with Pakistan not meriting attention, it is not. It is China's cat's paw. That's why you have to give it attention. But in giving Pakistan attention, we must remember that Chanakya was born in what is now Pakistan. And we sometimes forget his teachings on how to deal with the country. Pakistan says that I was in Pakistan when an ISI, former ISI DG remarked in a meeting that one of my officers was present. When he was asked what is the aim of the ISI, he said, our aim is to weaken India from within and we can do it. There's a saying that two can play the same game. So I leave it at that as far, but coming back to China, I think where we went wrong was one, in being totally new to the world of international affairs. The Chinese took us for a ride. The CIA suddenly developed an interest in Tibet after the Chinese India differences grew, and their own differences were growing after the Quemoy Matsu shootout on the disputed islands, and we placed a bit of faith on the Americans, which was placed in the wrong direction. I mean, I would rather have equipped myself with American arms rather than allowing them to play games on our borders. But instead, what did the Chinese do? In June 1962, the Chinese were secretly then negotiating with the Americans a deal to contain the Soviet Union. The rift with Soviet Union was becoming more difficult, but they played it in a way that it was secret. The Soviet Union didn't know what was happening. And they struck a deal with the United States that in the event of their tensions with India escalating, United States would not intervene. And here we were, Panditji rushing for a couple of squadrons, having a fighter aircraft, not knowing that the Americans would take us for a ride. And between the Americans and the British, they've told us between 62 and 64 that you give up Kashmir, settle with Pakistan, and then you look at what you have to do. And here I think I have to pay a tribute to the finest foreign minister I've worked with, Sardar Swaran Singh. He just stalled and stalled and stalled and bought time. That is the essence of diplomacy. When you have no cards, play your cards to buy time. And that's precisely what Sardar Sahib did at that point in time. He bought, because the Chinese-Pakistan nexus had started growing at that time. And interestingly, the rift with the Soviet Union grew. And at long last, the Soviets, who had withheld supplies of MiG-21s in 1961-62, but they found they'd reached a point of no return, they said, "Marzi le lo." The Soviets never armed us for fighting Pakistan. They armed us for being able to take on China. And in fact, this is a factor we have to bear in mind. When China goes into a conflict, it looks at the entire global situation. I recall that before they invaded Vietnam, I was in Washington. They came and created such a hoopla with every American corporate, saying we'll give you a market of 1 billion people, that Carter and Brzezinski fell for it hook, line and sinker. After having obtained American support was when they attacked Vietnam. He said, another matter that they got a bloody nose in Vietnam, unlike what happened in India. That's another story. The Vietnamese are made of a different metal. But that is the reality. The Chinese don't go to conflict lightly. They view the entire global context. They ensure that that one side or the other is going to be solidly with them. A large part of the world is going to be solidly with them when they go to conflict. These are the realities we have to realize. And I think, in fairness, as a new generation emerges, I find the younger generation in my service is perhaps wiser than I was. They are more clever. But you do learn by experience of interacting with the world more and more. And one of the other thing with us was, I remember what was the closed nature of our economy. China became a global economic power when they opened out to the world. And I recall that there was a period in the 1970s and 1980s when I was talking to some friends from Southeast Asia whose economy was growing at 7.5 or 8%. What do you make of greater industrial collaboration with India? He said, your problem is that you produce only one car in which every part makes a noise except the horn. But we have changed. We have changed. That is no longer the case. And nobody could have predicted that within 2 decades the change would be so profound. Having said that, I'll now come to the modern. I know I can see Air Chief Marshal Tyagi breathing down my neck. Quickly, China's become extremely assertive in its conduct of foreign policy. Primarily because that they are now prosperous. People want more. There are no democratic freedoms. The internet is available. The Communist Party, Wen Jiabao's wealth is $2.5 billion. Bozi Lai had a wealth of $5 billion. Our politicians are amateurs. So the fact is, everybody is making money there, and there is a disconnect between people and the leadership. So when you have a disconnect between people and the leadership, what did Sun Tzu say? Create external enemies. Claim the whole South China Sea. Declare Arunachal Pradesh is a part of China. So they are going through a very dangerous period, but also a period which presents us opportunities. The opportunities are the Russians are getting nervous that these fellows will swallow up Siberia. Because they claimed that till the 19th century Siberia was theirs. Japan, Indonesia, the entire ASEAN is very worried. But many of them are tied in a military alliance with the United States, and the United States is going through a recession, and Obama is saying budget bahut deficit bahut ban gaya hai, so please you guys settle it. We don't want to get drawn in, we'll help you militarily, this, that. We are not seeking American help. Today India is very fortunately placed for the simple reason that we have good relations with the United States, we have good relations with Arab, Iran and Israel, we have good relations with the Europeans. It is a question of how you leverage. And there is growing concern in the world. But even God won't help those who don't help themselves. Don't expect if you get into a conflict, somebody will, like a good Samaritan, will come rushing in to bail you out. It's not going to happen. You've got to stand on your own feet, on your own capabilities. What are the challenges that China poses? One, the border, yes. That claims to Arunachal Pradesh, yes. Are we ready? No. Why are we not ready? Lots of reasons. That's the way we function. You can't build border roads because of environmental concerns. Every border road project, I'm serious, is getting delayed because of that. And the fact is that over the last 3 years, I think we've mismanaged our economy. Our growth rate has fallen. And just bear in mind, in today's world, if you grow at less than 8%, you will not be respected. We were a member of BRICS, Brazil, Russia, India, China and South Africa, emerging fast-growing economies. There are people who are actually now saying after India's economic performance in the last 3 years, India and BRICS should be replaced by Indonesia. So, first thing, keep your budget deficit okay, be fiscally responsible, and for God's sake, learn how to grow. As China has demonstrated, making money for politicians and growth are not mutually contradictory. But at least we have to grow. And that is extremely important because we do need, as General Malik said, strike formations on the Chinese border. My understanding is the Ministry of Finance has to curb its budget deficit. I don't blame them. And some of your pet projects, whether it's artillery or MMRCA or strike formations, may face delays. And therefore, if you want Indian power to be retained, it is crucial that you set your house in order and grow at 8%. Otherwise, forget it. You are not going to be regarded forever as an emerging power. At some stage, you have to emerge. And people will persuade themselves these guys can't emerge. The other thing is, I think by and large we are doing well with our Look East policy, but again, very timid. As Bharat said, why on earth can't you, if China is supplying nuclear weapons to Pakistan, why can't you be supplying BrahMos missiles to Vietnam? Yet if you talk at it with the External Affairs or Defense Ministry, they get cold feet. It's an astonishing part of a lack of forthrightness. And as I said, to deal with Chinese assertiveness, you have to be tough. You don't have to be provocative, but you have to be firm. Now, two other points which concern me. One is the Chinese penetration of key sectors of our economy. All this trade is all very nice, but it is a balance where we sell raw materials and they sell us finished products. Now, according to official figures in the 11th plan, the total capacity which we added in power was 45,000 megawatts, out of which 17,700 megawatts was provided by Chinese generators. I won't go into the details, but Chinese equipment accounts for 40.2% of the market share in India. Now, if you mortgage sectors like energy, and we've had problems in power stations in Haryana and West Bengal, they fail, there's no, you have to send it back to China for repairs. The Chinese don't believe in transfer of technology. Another sector which is worrying to me is electronics and communications. The Chinese have perfected the art of cyber warfare. They can even challenge the Americans. Yet, our entire communications equipment is Chinese. The private sector, out of, I'm sorry to say this, out of corporate greed, whether it is power equipment or the electronics, rushes to the Chinese first, and then they have serious people from trade and industry saying, these are lovable guys, they are our best friends. Now, unless there is now a new manufacturing policy which was declared earlier this year, unless we give some protection and build up our power and electronics capabilities, both in economic and strategic terms, as far as our relations with China are concerned, would be disastrous. The Chinese have built up corporate lobbies in this country. They have built up political lobbies who advocate to the Prime Minister that allow free ingress of Chinese workers. And though a 21% duty was to be levied on Chinese power equipment, the government, with after much dilly-dallying, I'm told, has agreed to somewhere around 5%. Now, you cannot become a major power or a reckonable power when only 16% of your GDP is is made up of industry. No country grows that way. And we'll have to get our house in order. couple of things which Chief Marshal Tyagi spoke about was about the defense structures.
I would mind as Chief
Marshal Tipnis spoke about was defense structures.
Actually, just
2 minutes. I think these will be addressed if government shows the way. There are some things in the works which I hope government will address. They will ameliorate what we've been through. And finally, thank you very much for your patience. And to Chief Marshal Tipnis, sorry for equating you with someone so much as you.